Good morning, Shannon. How are you?
Hey, Barbara, I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, great. Good day. So I want to welcome you to our second interview with the St. Tammany Aging Network. And you guys, today we have Shannon Ory, and Shannon is here to tell us about her company. So, everybody has a story of how they got involved with working with seniors, and we'd love to hear yours, how it came about, and the name of your company, and whatever else you can tell us.
Yes. So my company is Aging Consulting Services, short is ACS. And I've always, Barbara, been drawn to the aging population. I remember I had a neighbor growing up in Metairie. I was probably 5 or 6, and she had dementia. And she would go outside and cut her grass with scissors. And I thought, okay, I could tell her that's not correct, or I could join her. And so I would get out there with my scissors and we'd cut her grass together. And I think those, first encounters with older adults, just I felt like they had a lot of wisdom to offer me, and I enjoyed their company. So I spent a lot of time with older people, and my family. There's 6 of us kids, and we had dinner together every night as a family, and my parents would often invite guests over, whether that was neighbors or friends or older people who didn't have family in the area. And one thing I was thinking about was at the dinner table, we were only allowed to have one conversation at a time, and each person at the table was required to ask an open-ended question, which meant you couldn't say, "Oh, how was your day?" because that could be answered with good or bad. You had to say, "Oh, what are some things that happened in your day today?" So that was kind of how I was trained to have conversation and listen to people. And so I was listening to all these older adults at the dinner table all the time, and got to hear their stories, and was really moved by that.
Incredible. Were your parents teachers?
No. Oh, well, I guess my mom was. She homeschooled my 4 older siblings. I was a little too rowdy to homeschool, but yeah, it was probably largely my dad who instigated that dinner time tradition.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, what is your background as far as working with older adults?
Yeah, so I'm graduated from Mount Carmel, and I moved to Fairfax, Virginia, where I studied senior housing administration at George Mason University. So it was a perfect area of the country to study because there was a lot more going on there with aging services, and thankfully my program was unique and gave us a lot of access to those opportunities.
Great.
So throughout my studies, I worked in a retirement. I moved to Elkhart, Indiana, which is, Amish country. And I worked in a retirement community there as they were building this state-of-the-art memory care community. And then I worked in a military officer retirement community. And then I did a local public access TV series with a professor from Duke, where we interviewed aging care providers. And so did lots of little things during my studies, and then took a break from my career path and was a Christian missionary for 2 years. And most of my work there, I lived in a rougher part of Southern Indiana, and my time was mostly spent visiting the sick and those who were homebound. So just accompanying those aging people. And that was a beautiful time, just to be close to people in their suffering. And then what else? Then I finished my 2 years as a missionary, and I stayed in Southern Indiana, and I worked with the Southwestern Indiana Regional Council on Aging.
Oh, wow. So your whole life has been a
Yeah,
service to seniors. That's beautiful, actually. That's very
yeah,
nice.
it's definitely been. It's like, how did this happen? How did each job kind of lead to this? But it just kept going, and so moved back to New Orleans about a year and a half ago. Worked for the Archdiocese of New Orleans, managing their home care
Ah,
agency. And then when they sold, it was a good time for me to reevaluate, and I just gotten married, and I thought, this is a good time for me to start the business I've been envisioning for a while. So it was just perfect timing. And then, I think one thing that really as I was telling you, Barbara, before, there's little things that morph your vision over time.
Absolutely.
And one thing that morphed my vision, or kind of led me, was my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer about 5 years ago. I guess it was 2018. And I was not married at the time. I was living in Southern Indiana, and 2 of my 6 siblings called and said, "Shannon, you should move home and help Dad care for Mom." And I really thought about that. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a good idea. What would that look like? And I didn't even think to ask, would they want that? But then the more I thought about it, I was like, okay. And I talked to someone I really trusted about it. And she just urged me to consider not taking over my dad's role of caring for my mom, as that could be a really beautiful time for their marriage. And that really shifted. And my dad was, in his 60s and very capable of caring for my mom. But I realized that I wanted to ask my parents what they wanted, and not just assume that I knew what they needed.
Very good.
And that I wanted to help families have those conversations with their family, with their loved ones. And sometimes it means stepping in, without without permission. But in this situation, my mom was sick then for 4 years. And I think my mom passed last summer, so 2022. And my dad would say that was the richest time of their marriage, was getting to care for her in that. So I would have regretted taking that over. So it really, and I still had my role in supporting and loving them through that whole season. But I've thought about that with, my clients that I'm relating with, that how can I help them experience, even in this suffering, the richness of that time. And I think it's a time for a lot of people of reconciliation, or kind of new ways of relating. And it's really hopeful, even in the challenge of it all. So
Truly. And you hear stories all the time that the beautiful moments of end of life care, it was great with my dad. So I can completely relate. That's beautiful. And your sister had a lot of wisdom to direct you in that way, though you may have thought of it on your own, but.
Right. Yeah. Thankful to have wise people in my life. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us about a typical client. You do your company's aging consulting services, and you consult with adults, kids of adults, on a regular basis. So what is a typical call that you would take, and can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So the way right now, I serve clients on both the North Shore and the South Shore of New Orleans. And the way it typically goes is, one of my mottos is transforming bureaucracy into humanity. I don't want to be a system for older people. I want to be a person that they can call. So right now in this stage of my company, there's no email subscription. There's no nothing. You just call me, and we can patch through it all to see if I can help in any way. So my typical clients, I get, a few different scenarios. One is, the 40-something-year-old daughter of the older couple, and she calls and says, I'm ready to start. I think it's time for us to start talking about end of life and what's our plan. And, that her parents are a little younger, and it's just the time to start planning for crisis. What are we going to do in this situation? We're seeing some signs that Mom and Dad are declining, but they're not struggling too bad yet. So they're ready to start having conversations. Right. The other scenario is the older child, maybe in their 60s or 70s, and they say, oh, wow, dad's in crisis mode. We're getting discharged from the hospital tomorrow. We're out of town. What do we do about his care at home? How do we make this work financially? How do we get somebody in there to help care for him? Do we need to move to assisted living immediately? How do we know it's a good fit for us? So there's kind of the crisis planning and the crisis, we're in crisis mode scenarios that I get from clients. So those are my typical
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I see a lot of. You have to love the planners, the planners, and there has to be a plan, because what I tell people is your kids are talking about you, whether you know it or not. They're having those conversations. And I just read, gosh, what book was I reading the other day? But it said that they're talking about you, they're making plans, and they're trying to see how your plans fit into their life. Because they have an active life, probably kids, or they're just having grandkids, and now they have to make all of this work. So yeah, the conversations are going on. So you really need to open up and have those conversations with your kids. You need to plan. So, and you're the perfect person to call for that planning. Let's see what this looks like 5-10 years from now, 2-3 years from now. Let's get the plan going before a crisis happens.
And it is kind of like you were saying, it is a sensitive topic. So it's handled delicately in relating with the clients. It's like, okay, how is each person in this room experiencing this conversation, and how do you kind of help that?
Well, thanks for letting us know about your business and how people can get in touch with you. I'll put that in the post as well, so they'll know how to contact you. But the last question we have for you is just a random fun question. And we'd love to know, how can I word this? So tell us something about your family life. Like, what do your mornings look like with your family?
Yes. Well, right now it's my husband and I got married in September, and we found out we were expecting in November. And so our little girl is due this July.
Awesome.
So right now, we bought a fixer-upper in Metairie. And so Saturday morning, when he's not working as an engineer, we wake up, we have our coffee, and then we're like, okay, what projects are we working on today? And last week it was hauling out an entire dump truck of concrete from our backyard. And, sometimes painting, sometimes it's putting peel and stick flooring on our, old terrazzo flooring that I have a love-hate relationship with. But yeah, and then a lot of times we're spending time with family. My husband's one of 10. And like I said, I'm one of 6, and we have tons of family in the area. So
love it.
Yeah, so we're usually spending time with them, or in some spontaneous event.
That's awesome. That's great. I love them. A big family. Big families are so important.
It's so awesome. Yeah, we're very thankful for that, and it's never boring.
Never. Okay, well, I appreciate you being here and taking the time to meet with me, and hope our other stand members get to know you more through this interview, and get to know each other through the interviews going forward. So have a nice day, and look forward to seeing you at the next stand meeting. Have a great day.
You too.